From Generation which received a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, to the literally unbelievable Johnny Mnemonic, Keanu Reeves has really put some stinkers out there. These are some of his absolute worst movies of all time. Starting with Generation that had the critics and viewers wondering what it really was. Reeves plays an escort service driver called John. He's basically driving his clients Violet and Mia to their various appointments. One night, they decide to start documenting their lives with a camera, and things do not get as interesting as you would expect them to. Instead, what you have is a series of really boring conversations about love, loneliness, and trying to figure out who they really are. The story is told in a way that doesn't follow a straight timeline. Instead, it jumps back and forth between different moments in time, which just gets really tedious. Critics were pretty harsh with their reviews. They said it was pretty clear that filmmakers didn't really have a clear idea about what they wanted to produce. So what we got was an empty and unfocused film that just made no sense. Maybe it was just going for the chill hangout movie vibe, but it just kinda turned into one big, what? moment. Perhaps just a kind of commentary on the futility of existence. Unfortunately, that's not the kind of stuff people want to watch, and the movie bombed pretty badly. But I think it was still better than Little Buddha, which was so wrong on so many levels. Reeves actually takes on the role of Prince Siddhartha Buddha. It was directed by Bernardo Bertolucci and tells the story of a young boy, Jesse Conrad, who's believed to be the reincarnation of a revered Buddhist teacher. The film alternates between Jesse's story and the story of Buddha's life. But what were the creators even thinking, casting him in the role of a South Asian character, especially when there are so many talented South Asian actors that could have been cast? To make things worse, the actor wore a ton of bronzer to try and look the part. Obviously, it didn't work. It never does. And then there's that horrendous accent he was putting on. Think of Pooh from The Simpsons, but worse.
Architect, finally I have met you. You will not rebuild your house again, but I am your house, and you live in me.
Let's not even get started on just how many mistakes they made in the representation of Tibetan Buddhism. I feel like they kinda got away with it back in 1993. This movie would never have seen the light of day in 2023. And everything you think of how unproblematic Reeves is, think of Little Buddha. He really should have known better. Some of the reviews were unforgiving. One said that the movie was slow and mostly pointless. But really, no one saw a problem with the representation. What's even more surprising is that it has a relatively decent 65% Rotten Tomatoes rating. Oh well, this next movie is probably one that even Keanu wishes he could forget about. The Watcher. Can't think of a more boring serial killer movie than this one. It has an 11% rating on the tomato meter, so it's really right up there with Generation Reeves plays the role of the serial killer David Allen Griffin, who's been preying on lonely young women in the Los Angeles area for years. James Spader is the FBI agent who's on the hunt for him. And honestly, this was a role that Reeves would probably be able to handle now, but not 20 years ago. The casting just didn't work. Can you see Keanu as a sadist? Probably not. One particularly scathing review compared the actor playing a serial killer to a kitten navigating a junkyard with 6 pit bulls guarding it. Not a pretty sight. Most critics also agreed that it was just badly written, and it just wasn't clever enough to be called a thriller. What a shame. Another thriller he was cast in was possibly even worse. His role as a police officer in 2016 Exposed flopped big time. Reeves is Detective Galvin and is investigating the murder of his partner. This leads him to a possible police cover-up and a dangerous scent that involves an unlikely young woman. The movie currently has an 8% score on Rotten Tomatoes, and with those kinds of numbers, it's a hard sell to convince anyone to watch it, even if it features Keanu Reeves. In fact, he just doesn't seem to be gelling with the character he's playing at all. He comes across as stiff and boring to say the least. Police dramas have plenty of emotion, but there was none from this character whose partner has been murdered, which makes the whole thing just really unbelievable. It's a bit of a disaster, and the critics agree. One even said that it would be an insult to all the other bad movies to call it the worst movie of the year. Like it wasn't even in the league of bad movies. It was worse. Ouch. Reeves's character clearly gets lost in what is a complicated plot. A bit bizarre too, as it's peppered with magic realism to make things worse, and very poor handling of sexual violence, switching across from the crime thriller genre to one that's usually considered more of his forte. But not in this case. The science fiction thriller Replicas was a definite miss. Now with The Matrix and John Wick under his belt, you would imagine that he more or less owns the sci-fi genre. Well, that wasn't always the case. Replicas will have you saying, what were they even thinking? The 2018 movie is about a neuroscientist who breaks the law and all the codes of bioethics to bring his family back to life. Not from a coma, but from actual death in a car accident. Surely even science fiction has its limits. If this were a Stephen King style horror flick, I might get it. Everything that could go wrong went wrong with this one. Critics ripped it apart for just about everything. The acting, the gaping plot holes, and even the CGI. This gives it a solid 11% on the tomato meter. One of the more creative reviews said it seemed like something made by a film student, but one said that they had binge-watched Brian De Palma and John Woo movies, and then basically vomited out their most basic moves. Now that is brutal. There's also another pretty bad sci-fi movie with Reeves' name all over it, but still marginally better than Replicas. Johnny Mnemonic has an 18% score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a cyberpunk thriller where Keanu Reeves plays a character who acts like a human flash drive. He transports sensitive content for mega corporations in a futuristic society. But to be honest, the movie is quite misguided from start to finish. It is surprising that despite this, the Wachowskis later cast Reeves to play Neo in The Matrix. The movie does try to convey a message about how technology is taking over society, but it's hard to take it seriously when the story lacks believability. The 1995 movie is actually based on a 1981 book of the same name. It's set in 2021, where the world is just run by these huge corporations, who are obviously evil. No surprise there, the design of the movie is also a bit tacky. Imagine a cheesy cyberpunk thriller. And then once again, the casting was all wrong. Even though it wasn't successful on its first release, they went ahead and released a black and white version last year. Amazing how they could make even the most creative genres of film boring, like Siberia, which is essentially a diamond heist movie. And who doesn't love a good heist? A charming thief taking off with some precious jewels is just one of those story types where we just willingly leave our disbelief at the door. But somehow, Keanu managed to make even that boring. There are also just so many absurd details that leave you scratching your head. His character goes bear hunting with his new Russian girlfriend's brother. What even? And the really tedious explanation of the cultural differences between America and Russia, just awful, honestly. And those were just some of Keanu Reeves' worst movies of all time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.